Good afternoon and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's session with Dr. Jamie Huysman. Today we're going to be talking about an introduction to the world of emotional intelligence with Dr. Jamie. Let me tell you just a brief little bit about him. Jamie Huysman built his innovative healthcare career on the premise that necessity is the mother of invention. His belief that the resilience of the human spirit and collaboration are the key to our country's health future is the core to his philosophy. He's a fierce advocate of patient-centered healthcare and a workforce in touch with their own wellness. He has almost 30 years of medical and behavioral health experience in nonprofit and for-profit corporate leadership roles. Today, he works in provider relations and governmental affairs for WellMed Medical Management, a San Antonio, Texas-based physician-owned primary clinic organization. He is their Chief Compassion Officer. Dr. Jamie, welcome to the session, and we're so glad you're with us today.
Thank you so much, Glenda. Are you hearing me now?
I am.
Wonderful. Fortunately, we just did that because the other computer just went down. So if you're a caregiver and you know something can go wrong the next moment, you're in the right spot. How's that?
Yeah.
So we all get it. We all get it. And this is the beauty, I think, of why we're talking about what we're talking about today, is that to really be, I think, nimble and to allow the world to come to you and not expect that everything's going to work out the way you think and be able to handle what needs to come into you instead of it handling you. Today was a critical sort of program for us to do. And that was on emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, to me, is the most important thing both a human being, not a human doing, a human being and a caregiver can have as we care for our loved ones, as we care for ourselves, as we work, even at WellMed, anywhere we go. Because you know what? If you're not taking your action first and really knowing who you are and really understanding what emotional intelligence is, you probably are going to be just like everybody else, which means one of many, okay? Emotional self-awareness. It's what we call EQ, not IQ. So what I'd love to do today is educate, energize, empower you with this concept. Now, I was trained many years ago, certified in emotional intelligence work, but this is going to be just for you. And you're going to know why you tuned in today. That's what I'm going to say. Only you will know. So you know me too well. I'm a trauma therapist, so I like grounding techniques. I like to go inside of our heart as opposed to our minds. And I want you all to close your eyes for just 15 seconds, okay? Join me, humor me. The longest trip you take is from your head to your heart. So we usually learn experientially. So with your eyes closed for 15 seconds, not yet, not starting yet, I want you to go inside and really think about why you tuned into this particular seminar today, why you tuned into the concept of emotional intelligence, okay? All right, with your eyes closed, we're going to take 15 seconds starting right now. All right, I want you to open your eyes, come back to our conversation here, and hopefully you found that reason, okay? That reason inside is your internal motivation, okay? It's so much better than anything external, okay? When it's external, it's what we call codependency, something out there, people, places, and things. But if it's internal, it's like a river of life that runs within you, and it keeps going. So whatever you went down and found, that was the reason you were here. All right, now let's wipe the slate clean and let me give you a little idea about the concept of EQ. EQ has been around a long time. Of course, it's been repackaged and renamed and talked about. It began in the 20s of social intelligence. We then had IQ tests with the Wechsler. You all are familiar with that. And today, we're now referring to EQ as Daniel Goleman's work. Daniel Goleman is actually a doctor in psychology and works at Harvard University. Okay, so we all have these Harvard experts that we think we know. Daniel is extraordinarily good and went down and took all the concepts around our emotional intelligence, why it was the most critical thing in the world, packaged it up, and created a book. And I'd love for you all to go take a look at this book, whether it's on Audible or wherever, Amazon. Go look for Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman after our conversation. So Goleman put it best, okay? literally. And I want you to just let this thing sink in for you for just a moment. If your emotional abilities aren't in hand as a caregiver, if you don't have self-awareness as a caregiver, if you're not able to manage your distressing emotions as a caregiver, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships as a caregiver, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. Make sense? You can't read yourself into good caregiving. You can't. You have to feel yourself into good caregiving. So we're going to talk about EQ, and we're developing, just so you know, this is all like a prerequisite to an institute we're putting together at WellMed called the EQ Institute, where people can come and gain, literally sort of drill down deals on what Daniel's work is all about. But emotional intelligence will always increase yourself, the likelihood of success, period. As much as 80% of adult success comes from EQ. Listen, even at WellMed, we have the most brilliant, intelligent people, right? They probably beat 10 people out for the job. People don't get fired or leave or quit the IQ. It's EQ. So WellMed supports this, and we're developing it now for our employees as well as for you as a caregivers, because it makes sense. Okay, EQ, literally said 90% of top performers have EQs. EQ is responsible for almost 60% of a job performance. Okay, people with high EQs, they make more money. All this is why WellMed is supporting it. But WellMed it needs to understand, just like you need to understand, that how do we hire for it? How do we kind of converse? What is the observational piece? And so we're putting together what we call the components, which are self-awareness, self-regulation. If you tuned into me, you know I'm a neuro guy, neurological. Motivation, empathy, and social skills. All these are benchmarks of EQ. So what are the obstacles of why we're not able to? How do we deal with the obstacles? Okay, they're all things you might call me or a coach for. Anxiety can block it. Depression can block it. Relationship issues, if you're in a really difficult, toxic sort of situation, high conflict can block it. Anger, addictions, all these block our EQ, our emotional intelligence. The greater the obstacle, okay, the more the glory of overcoming it. So understand all these things may be something you feel today. It may be something you feel in your caregiver relationship. Don't let it be a barrier. Don't worry about it all. Understand where EQ totally comes from. It comes from where I was trained, which is the neurological system, okay? Autonomic nervous system. Okay, EQ has literally been developed to deal with our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn sort of emotions. Now, anybody that's new to my conversation here will realize that fight, flight, freeze are biological defaults. So if you're seeing a trigger, you're getting upset, or old cues, or maybe it's the person you're taking care of, or maybe it's yourself, whatever it is, we go into these fight, attacking the threat, flight, escaping the threat, freeze, avoid provoking the threat, or fawn, placate the threat. That is your codependent response. That's your people-pleasing response. All of this is about our autonomic nervous system. So often I have to talk to people. This is not like a new age section at Barnes & Noble. This is the real deal. This is who you are. So I'm fortunate to be able to sit on the advisory board of what we call the Polyvagal Institute, with a fabulous thought leader. You've often heard me mention him. I really believe highly in his work. Is Dr. Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E. And he says your neurological system, or echoes your neurological system, like we all in psychology today know, is really the basis in childhood of how our neurological system gets programmed. Okay? So in childhood, the greatest damage done by neglect, trauma, emotional loss is not the immediate pain they inflict, but the long-term distortions that is induced. Okay? So a child, let's say a 1-year-old, 2-year-old child, comes into this world curious, crying, has no real preconceived notion. We develop beliefs along the way. We develop fears. We develop anxieties. We develop all that in our parenting process. If our parenting isn't sort of spot on, fair, consistent, available, consistent is the word here, okay, we then will develop sort of concepts we call narcissistic wounds, or wounds, and that really will turn into a fight, flight, freeze response later. So emotional intelligence is asking us not to stay stuck. It's also asking us to understand our minds and the concept of complex PTSD. Okay. I know this is not supposed to be a clinical rap, but this is really something that psychology now is looking at is the future and the future of caregiving. I was very fortunate a couple of weeks ago to do the National Council of Aging. We had about 8,000 people on the call, and I was able to introduce them into the concept of starting to get rid of this concept of codependency in caregiving and bring in the concept of complex PTSD. So what I'm discussing with you is how we were raised. Now, before you say, don't talk about my mom and dad, they were great. Listen, there's nobody who got this perfect. Okay, as a psychologist, I can tell you that, nobody. And we all create this inconsistency sometimes. We're not so fair sometimes. We're not maybe sometimes available. And things happen in a child's mind and they develop, if you will, sort of sometimes a negative self-concept if we don't pay enough attention to them. Sometimes they get that fight, flight, fear, which we call affect. They get scared because somebody's not going to be there. Childhood is a blank slate. Okay, nobody totally gets it right. We all emerge with some type of complex PTSD, so don't get concerned. And Gabor said it best. I'm 100% responsible for who I am in this relationship today. You don't have to blame your parents. You don't have to blame anybody. My task is to free myself sufficiently so I can respond in the present moment. That is our task as caregivers. That's our task as human beings. We can give a pass and grace to a lot of our parents, okay? Those who tried their best, because really, we don't have to get stuck in that concept of past programming anymore. We can take hold of our own brains, our own hands, and move on. And that's so much why I wanted to talk to you as caregivers today about Daniel's work and the 5 pillars of what we call emotional intelligence. Okay? So, you bet you've been asking all along here. So if I gave you a full IQ or Wechsler, it would say all the things they actually score on. So Dr. Daniel Goleman created the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. And these are literally the 5 pillars that the chair stands on. Okay, self-awareness. This is what our institute's going to be about. We're going to bring it to you as caregivers. Self-awareness, which is what? Understanding our own strengths or weaknesses. Realizing in the moment of our ability to look at ourselves instead of having to blame the world around us. Okay. Self-awareness is also better able to handle and learn from constructive criticism. We go into a shame spiral. We get into that ego sometimes and it gets crazy. Self-awareness is the ability to grow and not have that ego kind of run us. That's the first pillar. Self-regulation is the second. We often talk about that neurologically. I'm going to get into it more. Motivation. This is critical for us as caregivers, right? We need to be self-motivated. There's not a lot of people sometimes around us to support us. And they have that empathy, okay? Your loved one you're taking care of, if you're not understanding their fears, their fight and flight, they're in a chronic or terminal illness state, whatever it is, or acute, you have to be able to understand them, have empathy. And finally, emotional intelligence is how we're able to build rapport and trust. How are we able to connect with people? Remember, neurologically, it's about emotional self-regulation and co-regulation, meaning we got to hang around healthy and create healthy sort of people around us. So we can become unstuck as caregivers. We really can. We can develop emotional intelligence. And how do we do that? According to Daniel and according to, fortunately, an advisory board I sit on, the Polyvagal Institute with Dr. Mate, we can build bridges in the brain. Okay, our past psychology always said that we needed to go and talk about what happened to us when we're 10 years old, right? It was more psychotherapeutic, more Freudian, more Jungian. I'm a Jungian trained therapist, okay? So I've been a therapist for a long time. Today, we're really understanding that we can be our own therapist. And I don't think this is any more important than on the population that we are, caregivers of loved ones. We don't have to literally rely learned helplessness on somebody else so much, even our own therapist, to grow and change. So if you tuned in today as a caregiver, I want you to know we can develop emotional intelligence. Now, many of you heard about Nike. You know how they got the name Nike? It's the Greek god of victory. But Nike said, well, let's do it. Well, let's do this, caregivers. Let's understand EQ. So you can actually move on, literally, as caregivers and do this work with Daniel. He's got tons of coaches around. As I said, I'm certified in it. or keep coming back every month, because we're going to develop the Institute and we're going to provide you, the caregiver, the ability to learn from it just like our employees. How's that? I think it's really good for us. So let's go to the pillars now. Daniel's work, okay? And now I'm going to try to leave some time for questions here. Number one, self-awareness. I don't think there's a more important thing, certainly at WellMed or us as humans, for us to gain and learn and grow from. And caregiving teaches us a lot. Remember, I wrote the book, Take Your Oxygen First, with Lisa and with Dr. Rosemary Laird. They're wonderful people. And the book is really good. But what we did not necessarily include, okay, it was just recent, of course. We did it in 2006. And Daniel's work was in about 10 years, really, or about, he began in 96. So literally it's about 10 years prior. So it was being developed. And now we know for sure that emotional intelligence is what caregivers need the most. Although we would have recognized and done a lot more with this. But self-awareness is what? Recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses, knowing who you are, the ability to self-reflect, okay? Monitor your self-talk. I don't know if you remember that we used to talk about the 4 agreements. Dr. Miguel Ruiz, I love you to grab the book, because what we tend to do with self-talk is we really use the word against ourselves. Now, Daniel says self-awareness and not have this blame, and having forgiveness for ourselves is important. Also, self-awareness is putting boundaries around our lives. That no is a complete sentence. It really is. And then ultimately, we have to always question and have curiosity for ourselves, questioning our own decisions. It's important. It's important, and making sure we have a lot of support. So pillar 1 is self-awareness. Pillar 2, you and I have talked about this often, okay? This is emotional self-regulation. This is your stress reduction. This is also the ability for you to grow your own self-esteem, okay? Self-regulation means that you can become much more emotionally resilient by doing what we call loving kindness, compassionate acts for yourself. Okay, when you do this, negative feelings will kind of leave you. We're going to talk more about emotional self-regulators, but that's critical. The third pillar, okay, if you want some more drill down on this, is motivation. So as caregivers, we have to check our attitude, right? This is ideal. We don't have to have positive toxic positivity, but we have to be positive. To do that, we have to emotionally self-regulate. We can't rely on bumper stickers. Pull yourself up from the bootstraps, okay? Oh, this will be over. It is what it is. No, we literally have to do this on our own. It's called emotional regulation. We have to not to catastrophize. So when we go into that shame spiral, we tend to catastrophize. So motivation is not going to allow us to do that. We literally have to basically have our own personal, I call board of directors, which I think is important. The people that motivated us, okay, the people that inspired us. And like we just did, we have to understand our why. That's what I'd love for you to understand, why you checked in today. And most importantly, motivation comes from not getting too burned out, meaning we have to live a balanced life. Okay. So empathy is a differentiator, y'all, for what makes a human being and a human doing a human doing. Human beings who are not, and I'm going to stress this, who are not suffering from a disorder we call an attachment disorder, usually have empathy, okay? Empathy is important because empathy affects the way they see their world. They understand others. They can put their feet in their other shoes. They can appreciate others and themselves as human beings, right? They can understand feelings. If you understand your own feelings, this is all a journey through yourself. You're going to understand your loved one's feelings much better. You're going to realize that everybody's simply a human being here. Okay. And ultimately, empathy means, to bear witness to somebody's pain and yours first. And that means you can communicate with them because you start where they're at, not where you think they should be. So it's not something you can really teach, empathy, but it is something through your own first 3 steps here, the first 3 pillars, develop in a more highly self-aware, conscious way so that you can actually, in caregiving, feel it. So the fifth, the pillar that Daniel talks about, we're going to drill down more in the Institute, I think is possibly the most important next to emotional self-regulation, and that's healthy relationships. That's social regulation. That's literally people skills. Okay. So Gabor would say, look, we got screwed up sometimes in our first relationship with our parents, that we can only get healthy through our relationship with others. So what Daniel's work is about, Pillar 5, is how do you develop this, what we call family of choice? Okay. A healthy relationship is where two independent people just make a deal that they'll just help make the other person the best version of themselves. So I don't know if that means simply your loved one you care for or yourself, always starting with yourself, but you always have to really be there, meeting people halfway, trying to create the best sort of thing. If you look literally, and some of you may or may not, at the basketball or hockey series that are going on, the best leaders are the ones that allow their teammates to do better. Okay, they're not taking over the whole thing. So pillar 5, which Daniel talks about, and again, this is very, very akin to my neurological background, which is literally social co-regulation here, is this: you've got to have healthy relationships. And so as we go through this process and go through the Institute, this is the 5 pillars that we're going to show you. So emotional intelligence is not possible at all. And I want to keep stressing this, unless you have healthy, supportive people around you. So I just got off the phone before the session, actually, with somebody who's caregiving their father up in Jacksonville. And they have 4 brothers and sisters. And I said to her, I said, you know, I have not heard from your brothers and sisters. You're there for the last 4 weeks taking care of your father. All of them have kind of left. I said to her, it's so important for you to develop a support system around you, a healthy support system. So your brothers and sisters should be the ones that meet you halfway, right? Not dump the responsibilities on you. And she said, well, she'd had a difficult time with that. So I helped her get what we call a geriatric care manager. So I wanted her to have a clinician to contact her brothers and sisters and to create a healthy sort of expectation. How are you going to work in behalf of dad, and how I'm going to work in behalf of dad? But we have to meet each other 50-50. They can't just dump it, right? So honesty is what you're looking for in somebody, right? Respect. This is all for your caregiving brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, long distance caregivers. This is the minimum expectation you're looking at for people to help you. But understand that emotional intelligence isn't possible unless you have these type of people around you. If you have somebody around you constantly pushing you, bullying you, telling you what to do, right? Right? That doesn't sound right. It was very hard to develop EQ. Why? Because you're always in the fight, flight, and freeze or fawn response. So Gabor said it best, okay? And we'll get some questions and answers because I want to make sure, because there's sometimes some clinical complex things, but Gabor said it best, is that the child only wanted 2 things in life. And I think the adult does as well. And the caregiver, you've often heard me monthly talk about this. It's 2 things: authenticity, meaning the ability to be who we are, say what we need to say, feel honest without repressing it, pushing it out, and to have a healthy attachments, people that meet us 50-50, okay? What we tend to do, is give up our authenticity to attach. You hear me? We give up the ability to be honest in the moment, who we are, not have work concerns for the other person's sort of, I've got to fix them, or I've got to, I can't make them feel bad, like you really could make anybody feel bad. And we have to really own it ourselves and be able to do this. So it comes with us understanding EQ. And I'm hoping you're going to join us in this institute, because we're going to pretty much give you a training. You're going to come out a black belt, Daniel Goleman, emotionally intelligent caregiver. But to do all this, to clear your mind, to understand EQ, you're going to always have to realize that EQ, or emotional intelligence, we'll call it, begins with ourselves. So when I wrote that book, Take Your Oxygen First, it was the bare minimum with Lisa and Dr. Laird. It was the bare minimum of what we need to do as caregivers, is to understand who we are so we can understand who our loved one is too. So if you can't respect yourselves, okay, then how are you going to expect others to respect you? If you can't love yourself, how do you expect to love somebody else? If you can't have compassion for yourself, how do you expect to have compassion for others? So the whole world of EQ goes through you. It's not like a book. It is a book for sure. Daniel wrote, and a great book, but EQ is more the exploration of you. So for us caregivers, the hardest part about us and maintaining us is boundaries. So often you hear me talk about Brene Brown. She's very good on YouTube. I want you to keep going back to her, keep going and looking. But for us, EQ requires us to be able to say, this is who we are. This is how much we can do. This is what we can bring in. This is it. This is our best. Not perfectionism, but like Miguel Ruiz said, this is our best. We can lay our head on the pillow and say, we did our best. And setting boundaries, again, is a hard part for caregivers. There's a piece of us that wants to say yes to everything. We don't learn that no is a complete sentence. No is a tremendous, boundary and a wall that helps us inside restore ourselves, stay contained, stay in our own values. Okay. So realize that. So I'm going to say this, and Brene says it best, is when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable. That's the long distance caregiver. That's our loved ones. That's the doctor, nurse practitioner. We definitely feel used and mistreated. So I want you to start getting back into that concept that we always talk about here of reparenting yourself. If you can start reparenting yourself, EQ is going to require that. Emotional intelligence, Daniel's work, and all 5 pillars are going to ask you to kind of become your own parent, to accept yourself, okay? If you do all that, EQ says, and it's got great statistics and great outcomes, that resilience, okay, resilience will be there. That emotional intelligence, if you can learn the 5 pillars, and you will, we're going to make them available to you, you're going to develop resilience. So what is resilience? Resilience is the ability, right, to fall 7 times and get up 8. Does that make sense? Fall 7 times and get up 8. That's resilience. The more you can practice EQ, Daniel's work, the more you can learn about it and go inside and work through it, the more you're going to develop resilience, not just for your loved one, but for yourself. Okay. All the other factors do also have a role, but there was nothing like EQ when we did the measurements. And Daniel was dead on. So the intersection of emotional intelligence and resilience is you, okay? It's the whole gig here. It's your self-awareness. It's your ability to emotionally express. It's your authenticity, ability to be who you are and not worry about that person in front of you. If they have a problem with what you're doing or saying, they can call their therapist up, right? It's the ability to have empathy for the world and for the person in front of you. And it's the ability to have self-management, to literally manage your own emotions rather than your emotions managing you. So at Emotional Support Response Team, we're the guys who are actually doing this institute, and we're having this conversation with our employees. We believe that the road to emotional intelligence and resilience is through EQ. It's through Daniel's work. It's because Daniel's work includes social regulation, which is neuroregulation with people who are healthy, and emotional self-regulation, which is everything that we talk about at the Polyvagal Institute. And I'm fortunate enough to be at the Complex PTSD Foundation, dealing with childhood trauma. These are the factors of fight, flight, fear. So the more you start learning about our Harvard professor here, Dr. Goldman, and emotional intelligence, the better you're going to be, I think, as a caregiver. And the better your loved one will also feel, the safer your loved one will feel in your presence. So when we do the breath work every month, we do it for a reason. Like Daniel says, I mean, this is our gig. We come together every month. We emotionally self-regulate. We hang around each other. We hope with the same intentions. It's kind of like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or Codependency Anonymous. Okay, there's 12 steps and there's meetings. But understand it's a process, not an event. And learning about EQ, okay, you don't have to get a doctorate in it, but learning about EQ and practicing the 5 pillars along the way, and there's a lot of ways we can do it. We'll talk about it as we get into our institute. Understand that it is a journey of 1,000 miles, begins with a single step. So as you go into Memorial Day this week or whatever you're doing as a holiday, this is a great time to explore Dr. Goldman's work of EQ, of emotional intelligence. It really is. But understand that unlike when I get you to read this or listen to the audible, that's not going to be enough. Okay. Your story and your growth as a caregiver is going to depend upon your ability to do it. Remember, Nike, just do it, to do the experiential work. So you're going to have to learn how to emotionally regulate, stress reduction, also hang around healthy people, learn about your motivation to do things, that type of thing. But the longest trip you take is from your head to your heart. So in emotional intelligence, you got to understand that every one of us are different. We're all starfish. Okay. So we have a different rate. We were raised differently. We have different cultures. We have different religions, different parents, different disorders, different medical issues, different cities. There's not going to be one other person like you in the entire world ever. Right. So what does that mean? That means that we don't ever see things as they are. We see them as we are. So the more you're practicing emotional intelligence, you'll become self-aware. Emotional intelligence, you'll become less in the fight, flight, freeze mode because you'll be emotionally regulated. The more you understand this, the more you're going to set up a support network and not isolate. Okay, and on and on. So that's what the Institute is. But understand, we never see things as they are. We see them as we are. And that is what I want you to take home. So the curriculum in emotional intelligence is a curriculum that everybody has to do, at least at WellMed. And you have to do as caregiver. Why? It's going to allow you a healthier outlook. It's going to allow your loved one to feel more safe. It's going to really, at the end of the whole process, it's going to give you what we call a retrained brain and the ability to always understand that you can't control things out there. You can't control your loved one's medical condition. You can't control what's going on in their pain or anxiety. You can't control the COVID. You can't control the hurricanes or tornadoes or the ice storms, but you can deal with the response. And what emotional intelligence is, it's our response. It really is. It's a curriculum to develop our response. Because, for instance, in the 12 steps, we say, grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Emotional intelligence allows you to understand how to change the things you can based upon his 5 pillars. So we understand it's critical. So if you got the concept of childhood PTSD and you get the concept that, which is what Daniel bases his on as well, and we do too at the Poly.
Jamie, you froze right there. If you weren't with us earlier, he had some storms rolling through his area, so that may be what's affecting him right now. There you are. Okay. Nope, can't hear you. Unmute.
And where did I phase out? Help me out. This is what caregivers should do.
At the Polyvagal Institute.
Oh, okay. So Daniel Goleman's work is based upon ours at the Polyvagal and our trauma gurus we call there. It's also based upon the Complex PTSD Foundation. So forgive the technology here. The storm is pretty bad out there. All of this is built on what we talk about month in and month out is your childhood PTSD as a caregiver coming into the fight, flight, freeze response. So understand that stress reduction is what we have to do for ourselves. This is the critical element that we have to understand. If you want to first understand why you're going to do Daniel's work and come and join us monthly on the Institute, you also have to do this parallel stuff, the experiential stuff, the stress reduction stuff. Okay, because it's all kind of intertwined. Don't look at this as like sequential. Look at all this as parallel. Okay, so that's it. First and foremost, we must understand what we're doing. Now I'm going to do the breath work, but beforehand, I would like to open it up a little bit, Glenda, because I don't know exactly where I phased out. And also, I don't know where maybe the listener phased out. And I'd like to answer any questions where I can bring EQ into this caregiving world in a more kind of safe fashion for the audience.
All right. If you have a question for Dr. Jamie or a comment you'd like to make, just unmute your microphone and I will call on you by your name. And you can join Dr. Jamie in the conversation about EQ.
And
Dr. Jamie,
yeah, please go ahead. If you have any caregiving question, I'll tell you how EQ fits in, but go ahead.
was that Dr. Brandon Goldman or Daniel Goldman?
Oh, it's Daniel.
Daniel.
Give my friend Daniel the kudos on this one. And there's a lot of Harvard experts out there, right, Minerva? And the beauty of Harvard experts is it's very difficult to become a Harvard expert, right? Daniel Goldman went from another sort of perspective. The development of emotional intelligence was kind of flew in the face of a lot of things that the Harvard professors were doing. I mean, Skinner was a Harvard professor too. He's a behaviorist. So Daniel, it should always be known, he did some pioneering work of repackaging, but bringing together all that psychology had started in the early 1920s.
Any questions about caregiving concerns that you have right now? Coping, dealing with family members? Jamie's available. Janita.
I'm happy to do it.
Yes.
Hey,
I have a question. When it comes to caregiving, and if you're dealing with someone that has dementia, how can you utilize both EQ and IQ to, for one, keep them feeling safe and comfortable, and for two, helping them to adapt to change a little bit easier?
Janita, I think, am I saying your name right? Am I
yes,
saying your name right? Oh, I think this is a great question. Actually, it's one of the best questions I've had. So here's the deal. This is how IQ and EQ do come together. It's a perfect question. IQ will tell us a lot about neurological science, right? The decompensation, if you will, the phases that we go through from mild cognitive impairment to, wherever we then end up. And maybe it tells us a little about ourselves medically and psychologically. IQ will give us the academics of memory loss, right? Whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, traumatic brain injury, Lewy body, all of them are challenging beyond belief. And information, though, is key. Now, that is the world of academics. It's also the world that Janita knows is probably going to be predictable. Now, the part that you're asking about EQ, which is this a great question. EQ, and if you can practice the 5, you're going to come up with the concept of this.
You froze again, Jamie. Those storms. Jamie's in Florida, and they are having some storms right now. So that does affect his technical ability to be with us. Let's see. Hopefully he'll join back with us in a minute. No, you're coming and going. Now, let's see here. I think he logged off. Oh, there he is. Okay.
No, I'm so sorry.
Are.
It's a storm here. I'm so glad it came up for Janita too, because of that question. I didn't want to go anywhere. So Janita, you got the academics of it. You understand about memory loss. There's experts out there that do that, right? But
yes, sir.
The EQ part is you'll start seeing your loved one as in those stages as somebody you're not going to enable, believe it or not. You're not going to do everything for them because they too have a self-esteem. Now, whether it's a psychiatric issue, a neurological issue, maybe it could be cancer, it could be diabetes, something that fogs us up. It could be anything. Then we'll see the other person will have the empathy. Our motivation will deepen. We'll not just only emotionally self-regulate, we're going to teach them how to self-regulate. So I have caregivers teaching their loved ones, even with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, how to do breath work. I have them going out and bringing vitamin D and stuff in. I'm going to tell you that when you start learning about EQ and what you already know, Janita, because you asked such a really astute question, you're going to combine these two worlds, and it's going to make your life as a caregiver so much easier. We tend to put the super cape on and not realize that we have to have empathy and motivation and understand the other person because we're emotionally self-regulating. And so these two feed off each other, Janita. So stay tuned. They're like two flip sides of a coin as you take care of somebody with memory loss. And thank you for what you're doing. I mean, gosh knows, if you I would send you to our book that we wrote, which was obviously for caregivers of neurological disorders. And it is good. I think it is good. But we didn't really pay as much attention as we should to the brain. So, but feel free, or if you're at WellMed or if you're in Texas, go into a caregiver SOS and they've got Take Your Oxygen First and tell them I'll pay him for it and it's all yours.
It is a good book, Jamie. Michelle wanted to know, are there basic, simple EI exercises that I can share or do with the person I care for? Another good question.
It is. You're going to find out that what we've discussed, I don't know how many of you have been along for the ride since every time I'm on, I will always use the science of neurological safety, meaning I think caregivers have to learn to befriend their nervous system, not to wait to come see me as a psychologist. I think every day you will have these exercises of yoga, Pilates, emotional regulating. I have 200 people in a call center, and one person was having a very difficult time, and I asked the supervisor, will you play around with me here and let us try an experiment? So I went to the person at the call center. I said, what's your emotional regulator? She says, I love crocheting. I said, really? So I said, wow. So I went back to the supervisor and said, will you let her crochet while she gets 15, 16 calls a day, and let's see what happens at the end of the month? And darn it, she calmed down. She was the best. She got great feedback. Mm. So that question is, what can we do? Is right now, I want you to find your emotional regulator. Look behind me. I mean, you see this? I've got all rock and roll stuff, right? Believe it or not, I listen to rock and roll, and then I'll go to a rock concert, and that's my emotional self-regulation. And that's my co-regulation. But it may be that yours is like the crocheting. It may be yours is the fishing. It may be yours is the Pilates. So the big question is, how do you do stress reduction? You don't have to sit on a mountain. I'm going to teach you breath work here in a minute. You don't have to sit on a mountain in Tibet. These are little tiny trauma reduction techniques that we can just love ourselves with. So that's how you can do it. And that's what Daniel will obviously do. And that's what we do at the Polyvagal Institute.
Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else?
It's almost having compassion and loving yourself. It's reparenting yourself, y'all. You know, yeah. It's acknowledging it. My parents didn't do that. I love them, but they didn't know what they were doing. So I had to reparent myself. Anyway.
What was the name of that book again?
My book is Take Your Oxygen First. But maybe they have it at Caregiver SOS. And anybody's on this call could go get it, and I'll be happy to pay. It's a foundation. It goes to a charity anyway. So
yeah. Very good. It was one of the early works, as I recall, Jamie, about caregiving and taking care of oneself as a caregiver.
It was. It really was. And we're very blessed that we did it. But everything's moving. It's kind of like emotional intelligence for you guys as caregivers too. Everything is moving. We're learning new things every day. You know, look at this artificial intelligence garbage, right? I mean, that could take over the world if we don't understand it. Everything is happening as we speak. So we don't want to. Curiosity is a part of also emotional intelligence. So we want to remain curious.
Let's see here. Myra said, read the book. It was very good. The first book I ever read as a caregiver, and she got it on Amazon.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Lisa let us into her life. We followed her father, her sister, and her mom was in a nursing home. And we wrote the book. Dr. Laird's a geriatrician, and I'm a psychologist. And Lisa was good enough to let us into her life, and she wrote a lot of that too.
And he's referring to Lisa Gibbons, if you remember Lisa Gibbons.
Yeah, if you remember Entertainment Tonight, that's Lisa.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful woman. Minerva has given you the link in the chat box where you can get that book.
Oh, it doesn't go to me either. I mean, gosh knows it is a good book, but it all goes to the charity, y'all. I'm not making some claim here to send me money. Don't worry. But feel free. We're all here in it together. We're all in this together.
I cannot imagine you ever doing that, Jamie. Asking people to send you money. No, that's not.
We need to have each other's back, right, Glenda?
Exactly.
It's just, it takes a village here. So if you want, I can teach you. This is the first way you can start taking care of yourself, y'all. Is self-awareness is really breath work. You can send me questions. You can get to Glenda. I'm more than happy. I'm sure I'll be back next month, and we'll drill deeper into the topic. We'll try to also give you some experiential things to do. But this, what you can do to love yourself, is do what I do with cops, firemen, emergency medical technicians, is breath work. Breath work is the only thing that human can do that animals cannot. We have evolved our lives since the beginning of caveman days because we could calm ourselves and we could sit in communities and create innovative solutions. Animals really had a more difficult time. And breath work was a way to calm you. I don't know. We do this with professional caregivers for many years, but for family caregivers, there's nothing like it. It does create the self-awareness, which you know is the first pillar, because it'll calm your anxiety, stress, and anger in the moment. And look, what caregiver doesn't have that? You know, I do. Every one of our employees does. So breath work will take you and put you in the moment, taking you out of the anxiety of tomorrow and the fears that come from yesterday. We're going to put our website in there later and all that, because you can actually access ESRT's website. I'm not sure, Minerva, you're able to put it in there, but it's ESRT. And if you click on community, all the caregivers can go in there and access whatever.
Yep, froze again. Must have been more thunder and lightning coming your way, Jamie. I certainly appreciate y'all's patience today as we've had these technical difficulties in Florida. Anouk said she's down there, so she understands, I think. They're rolling through. And I live in Central Texas, and it's a common occurrence this time of year for us, but not today. There you are. Okay, you got to unmute again.
That's all right. I'm back. See, the storm's bad, but we're going to make it through this, y'all, no matter what. So what cops and firemen do before they go into a SWAT situation is that they make a stupid thing. You can read about in the papers over the last many years here. If they're not emotionally regulating, becoming proactive instead of reactive. Reactive is not what you want. It's not what a caregiver wants either. We need to be proactive. So you can go from a negative emotion to a positive one using breath work. You really can. You can do the stress work, and you can actually ground yourself on 2 feet when you're feeling out there. Our vagus nerve is what goes from the cortex of our brain to our healing organs. That's what breath work does. It calms the vagus nerve. It's a grounding technique. And many of you know when I do breath work, you don't have to do it. I just want you to trust the process of experiential learning, meaning you can close your eyes and I'll give you something else to do, but it will change your brain scans. All the reports have said that neuroregulators, when you reparent yourself, deal with the vagus nerve, unlock the really power of it, calm yourself through emotional regulation, you'll start healing your life. If you do it once a day, it'll calm you in the moment. If you do it 4 to 6 times a day, it'll create neuroplasticity, which we says is retraining the brain. So look, you don't have to do the breath work. If you want to take the 80 seconds it'll take us to do the breath work and just do gratitude thoughts, you can do, we can be silent, you can pray. Everybody asks about praying. I'm not preaching one religion or another. You could have Moses, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, but the righteousness of prayer is a neuroregulator, believe it or not. And that's really something that really calms people. That's great. You can also go to a safe place you once were, touch it, feel it, and smell it when I ask you to close your eyes. Or you can learn breath work. So Dr. Weil is somebody I had the pleasure of working with years ago, and he is brilliant. You can go to, again, we do this every month, but you can go to YouTube and put 478 in and put WEIL, and Andy will do it for 2 minutes. And you can continue this. Try it when you're with your loved one and you're feeling dysregulated, and say, look, I'll be back in about 80 seconds. That's what we do with our patients sometimes in the waiting room. I'm back in 80 seconds. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do breath work. What? Yeah, here, why don't you try it too? 4, 7, 8, okay? So here's how you do it if you're new to this call. You'll breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds when I ask you to close your eyes. You'll keep it in your mind for 7 seconds. But your exhalation, okay, your 8-second exhalation is what triggers the vagus nerve response. So exhale loudly so your dogs and cats and your loved ones can hear it, okay? But exhale, that's the secret sauce. We're going to do it 4 times. If the internet cuts out again, this is not a tough one. You can figure it out, okay? But let's close our eyes, put our feet on the ground, feel the floor through your shoes if you have shoes on, or if you have barefooted, feel the floor through your feet, and with your back upright with respect. Let's just try it 4 times, okay? Now, with your eyes closed, breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds. Keep it. Swish it around for up to 7 seconds.
Oh, he froze and I was running out of breath. Okay, don't hold your breath anymore. All right, Jamie, you're frozen. I kept thinking I'm running out of breath. I bet y'all were thinking the same thing. Jamie, we were all holding our breath.
Oh my gosh, guys, don't depend upon technology. Let's do it 2 more times. It'll be fun.
Okay.
Now with your eyes closed, feet on the ground, maybe you're dysregulated. Let's try it. Breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds. Keep it, swish it around for up to 7. Blow out with passion for 8. Last time. Breathe in the calmness for 4. Keep it, swish it around for 7. All the anxiety you're feeling for 8. With your eyes still closed, feet on the ground, go inside your body and scan it. Literally, you could do this any given moment with your loved one, any given moment if you're feeling dysregulated. You just created oxytocin, hormone in your body, connects to your neurotransmitters. You shifted the chemistry with the technological problems in less than 80 seconds. When you're ready, open your eyes, come back. Realize that these technological problems are like a metaphor, right, Glenda, of caregiving. So even if you came back for 2 breaths, I bet you know now it's a moment of self-compassion to regulate yourself. It changes your day. It just changed dysregulation in that moment. I'm so sorry you got to suck that breath in and keep it in there, but bet you'll learn next time to let go of it. And just know a string of moments like this changes the course of your life. So emotional intelligence isn't the triumph of heart over head. It's the unique intersection of both. To Janita's question, this is exactly your answer, Janita. So take your oxygen first. Know that better things are coming. They are. Keep calm, and just breathe. Glenda, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamie. And thank you all for hanging in there with us as he came and went throughout the call today. But the information was there. One thing I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jamie, before we get off is you were talking about the Institute. When might we look for that to be unveiled or rolled out?
That's a great question. So I'm hoping against hope with time, and I'm hoping to have it done within the first module in 30 days. I hope to do it next time. Yeah, don't hold me to it. It will be no more than 60 days for the first module. But we're creating it for the whole year, and we're going to open it up not just to our employees at WellMed, but we're going to open it up to our caregivers as well. So I'm looking forward to being a part of it. So don't hold me to it too much. Do some breath work if you get anxious. In the meantime, you can go Google Daniel's work too. And EQ has been around for a while. There's some excellent coaches in the area. But to Glenda, I'm going to try to get it done by next month, but no more than that. And then everybody can be black belts in the dojo of the EQ. Excellent.
We all need that. We need that help and support. We have one more session in the month of May that I wanted to tell you about. I'll be back with you next Tuesday, May the 30th at 11 o'clock Central Time. A new presenter for me is Emily Kenway, and she's going to be talking about who cares, the hidden crisis of caregiving and how we solve it. Really an interesting topic. I have not heard a discussion on this yet. If you have not seen our June calendar, it's jam-packed full of all kinds of sessions, so please look that up on the Caregiver Teleconnection website. And thank you for your wonderful comments to Dr. Jamie. And Jamie, I'll see you again next month. No matter what the topic is, it'll be a good one, I feel sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I love working with you and the Charitable Foundation, and I really love connecting with these caregivers. Listen, whether you're professional or family caregivers, we are a community. And so we just need to have each other's backs, Glenda. So I love working with y'all, and I'll look forward. Be kind to yourselves.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today, everyone. And I hope to see you soon on our next session. Bye-bye.